Hey, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin'. What I want to talk to you guys about today is lipless cranks. It's late fall going into winter. Seems like an odd time to bring up lipless. Most people throw them in warm water, throw them in the summertime, late spring, early fall. But what I want to talk to you about is how to choose the right baits and use some alternative retrieves to take a bait that's normally just used in warmer water and turn it into a bait you can throw 12 months out of the year. You can throw it late fall, you can throw it middle of the winter to put some big fish in the boat. For me, it comes down to two things. The first is going to be sound, the second one weight. You know, there's a lot of brands out there, a lot of different models, a lot of different styles. I really don't get too caught up in that. I'm not here to tell you you need one bait over another. I will tell you my preferences, but I'll tell you how I got there. First, let's talk about weight. You know, whether you're fishing quarter ounce, half ounce, 3/4, really doesn't matter because you and I probably aren't fishing on the same waterways. My fish are probably a little bit different than yours. But what you want to focus in on is finding a compact package. So I'll take these two for example. You've got a 3/4 ounce rattle trap. Then you've got a Lucky Craft LV500, also 3/4 ounce. When I put those baits side by side, you can really see the difference. The Lucky Craft is so much smaller. When you're in that cold water, it's really important to get a compact package. You get a different fall rate out of the bait. They fall to the bottom much harder. They hold bottom a lot better. It's also easier for the fish to get it in their mouths. Another perk is that you get away with a smaller hook. Normally you don't hear me talking about compact packages and small hooks. I like to throw a lot of big baits. But in that cold water, it can make a huge difference. That LV, you can get away with a size 4 hook, even a size 6 hook if you want to, but I prefer 4s. So again, it comes down to preference, but you want to look at those baits and try and find the smallest bait that you can in a given size. Even within the Lucky Craft line, another example would be this one. Again, that LV500, really compact package. This is an LVR D10, but this is a half ounce bait. It's got a great sound to it, but when you really get into that cold wintertime water, go to that smaller package. It'll work better for you. The second thing is sound. Sound is so critical. What I have found personally, when I get into that cooler water, is that the deeper, louder sounds make all the difference over those higher pitched tones. Of course you can pick up the baits and shake them, but you can also take the baits, hold them up to the light. If it's a ghost bait, you can see all the rattles in there. You can really get a feel just by looking at the bait what they're going to sound like. What you're looking for in that colder water is baits that have larger bearings in them. Doesn't matter if they're glass, stainless, brass, whatever they may be. If it's the larger size balls, you're going to get that deeper knock out of the bait. It's going to call fish from farther. It's going to be louder, more obnoxious. It's going to draw those reaction bites, those really hard hits, because it's just down there making a huge ruckus. Again, you're not trying to catch active fish. I'm not talking about doing this when the water is 86 degrees. I'm talking about doing it when the water is 38 degrees up into the mid 50s, even low 60s. These different retrieves are really going to let you capitalize on those fish, trigger those fish that otherwise wouldn't be biting, and get really vicious strikes. So my time on the water, and not just my time, a lot of us are doing this, but what I've found, what we've all found, is that there's one bait for us that stands out in this cold water. That is the Lucky Craft LV500. It's the most compact bait I found in a 3/4 ounce. Very small, still has that deep rattle, makes a huge difference. That compact heavy weight keeps that bait on the bottom really well. You've got good bottom contact. You can feel those fish really well. You can feel the rocks really well. Really improves the bite for me. This last year, they came out with a spin version. It's got the blade on it. I've started doing really well on that bait as well. This is the first fall I've had with it, It came out last year, but I didn't jump on it right away. But I've seen a big improvement with that as well. Just that extra flash added to the overall package has made a difference. I also want to talk to you about the gear that we're using, as well, of course, the retrieves that I keep mentioning. Gear, I keep it pretty simple. I like a 7-foot rod. I know Tim will sometimes use a 7.6, but a really moderate slow crankbait rod. Really limber rod. When we use those rods, we use them with braid, of course. We're both using 30-pound braid, anywhere from a 10 to 15-pound leader, depending on circumstances. That's going to work pretty well because you really want to play those fish out. With these light hooks, that LV500 comes standard with a size 4 hook. I change them out. If you watched the treble hook video that we did, you would know this is a bait that the fish are really engulfing. They're not slapping at it, they're engulfing it. So I go to an EWG style hook, a bait that has, a hook that has the points tipped in. You're going to get a really good hookup. Once those fish are on, they stay on. So we use that really soft, really limber rod. Once you hook those fish, you sort of lean back on them, keep pressure, and just let them play themselves out. That EWG style hook is going to stay in there as long as you keep that pressure on the fish. Now the retrieves, when we start talking about the retrieves, there are quite a few different things that you can do. You know, we all go down the bank, chucking and winding a lipless bait. That's not what I'm talking about right now. What we're going to be doing is fishing these baits hard on bottom. There are a couple of different things that we do. The first retrieve that I use when we're throwing these baits is I'll throw it out there, let that bait fall down to bottom. You get it good and solid on bottom. Then what we'll do is just take and just barely lift that rod tip, just a tiny bit. And all you're doing is taking that bait and hopping it just enough that it moves. That's all it's doing, is basically just flip-flopping on the bottom. It's not going anywhere. Almost like you would with a spoon in freezing cold water, where you just flip it and that spoon's just flip-flopping on the bottom. We're doing the same thing with the lipless. The benefit is you're getting the sound in addition to that action. It really pulls the fish to the bait. Once in a while I'm doing that flip-flop, you just give it a little hop. Jump that bait up off the bottom. If there's a fish there that's been looking at that bait, that's when they're going to hit it. One of the great things about these baits is if it's a quiet day, even in 15, 20 feet of water, a lot of the time you'll hear that bite. These baits are so loud, when they hit it, you hear it. It'll tune you in right away. Even if you're not paying attention, you'll hear that bite, set the hook. That does bring up another point too. These baits work in 2 feet of water, they work in 70 feet of water, they work everywhere in between, because we're not just chucking and winding. These are no longer a shallow water bait. You can do it in any depth depending on where those fish are. Second retrieve. Instead of just throwing it out there and just flip-flopping it, we'll shake it in place like it's a jig. You just shake that rod and that bait's just laying on the bottom, just shaking, making a bunch of ruckus, and those fish will just come up and tag it. It's bizarre. Frankly, it blows my mind every time it works. Traditionally, you'd be throwing a jig, throwing a tube, a worm, in that cold water, moving really slow, but you can do the same thing with a hard bait. Draw those fish from farther. You're just increasing the area that you're fishing because you can pull them from a greater distance to that bait. The third retrieve, the one that we use most often, once you throw it out, get it settled down to the bottom, we're going to reel up our slack, and then all you do is just pull that rod up a little bit. Pull it up 12 to 18 inches, nice and slow, just enough that you feel the bait flutter, and then you just hold that rod and the bait will settle back to bottom. Reel up your slack, lift the rod, wait for the bait to settle, reel down, lift the rod. The bite's going to come one of two ways. When you go to lift it up, they're going to smash it. Number two, you're going to lift up, drop it, and as you're doing your reel down, they're going to hit it on the slack. You're never going to feel it, but when you go to pick up again, the fish is already going to be there, and your lift just turns into a hook set. The fourth and final way that we throw them is a full-on aggressive reaction bite where you're just ripping. Throw it out, let it get down to bottom. We have a friend here on the lake that used to call it the rip and rattle retrieve. Throw it out, get on bottom, reel up your slack, rip. Reel down, rip. Reel down, rip. And when you're doing that, again, that LV500 or some other heavy bait is key because you're going really fast and you need that bait to be getting back to bottom every time. That's so important that you keep it down. When you're doing that retrieve, when you get a bite, you need to be wearing an elbow brace. I mean, it hurts. It's big fish, they hit hard, they fight hard. It's a very aggressive way of fishing. It'll leave bruises on your side when you're on a good bite, but those fish eat that bait when they don't want to eat anything else. Take those 4 retrieves, put them to work for you. Try it. We're going into the cooler months. Some of you guys are already frozen out. For you, I'm sorry. You should probably pause this, come back in a few months so you don't have too much cabin fever. But for the rest of you guys, tie on a lipless, go out there, try these retrieves. You're going to see that you can catch some fish that you've been overlooking all this time. Good luck out there. Second retrieve is very erratic. This one, we're gonna work the bait and then we're gonna rip it, but we're gonna, rather than like a sharp snap, we're gonna really pull the bait.